On to bad things and bad news, and I'm bearing bad news week after week.
I
There's
know
a lot of
day
it this week, so let's get to it.
257. We're long away from the early days of the revolution. So let's do a recap of how far we've come.
It feels like, we're just talking about current protests or what's going on right now, but it's really important to remember how far we've come. And it's like, how much longer is it going to take? Well, when you look, I mean, I was looking over this list. I'm like, I got to share it just to put it into perspective for everyone else. This is a rundown for anyone who needs a reminder on how this all started and where we were. So day one, it was Gina Amini's arrest. Day two, it was Ali Karimi's tweet of support. And don't worry, I'm not going to go to day 257, but I'm just going to do a couple of rundowns. Day four was when Gina Amini passed away. Day six was when the Sanandaj rebellion started. Day 8 was when anonymous hackers joined in this revolution. Day 10 was when we started international outreach. Day 11, Hossein Ronari got arrested. Like, imagine, we're day 257, and on day 11, Hossein Ronari was arrested. Day 13 is when Hadis Najafi was killed. Then we have National Strike Day that started on day 14. Then we have the Chabahar incident where there was a terrorist attack that was on day 15. Day 16 is when Shervin Hajipur released the song Baroye. Then we have the international calls for protests. That was on day 19. Day 20 is when we had the Sharif University terror attack from the Islamic regime when they arrested innocent students. Then we had day 22 when Nika Shah Karami was murdered. We had day 23 when Jadi Mir Marini was arrested. Then day 25 is when Sarina Esmailzadeh was killed. Then on day 27 is where there were massive protests in our Kurdish provinces. So, I mean, those were just the under 30 days. That's everything that happened. And I hope that remembering those names like Hadis and names like Nika and names like Kian will remind you of why we're doing it. It's long way off from those early days, but this is the same revolution. It's the same fight, and it's
Sure.
not over.
Well, I appreciate that recap, and it's crazy that was just 1 month of it. There was a request over here. What a timeline! Can you post this on your page? If you do have that, you can copy and paste and send it to
Yes.
me, and when we upload it onto YouTube, I'll make sure to add that in there. So yeah. So okay, the trial for the two Iranian female journalists who helped break the story of Gina Amini's death has started. What do we know so far about that?
So they've been in custody since September. If I'm looking onto the side, it's because that's where my notes are. They're on trial before a revolutionary court. So keep in mind, they were arrested back in September. Their trial hasn't started. The individuals are Nilufar Hamedi. She was arrested on September 22nd. Elahe Mohammadi was arrested a week later. They've both been charged with collaborating with the quote-unquote hostile U.S. government and propaganda against the establishment. Prosecutors are refusing to provide families and their lawyers with information in the case. So keep in mind, these individuals are going to court, but the prosecution will not give them full details on what they're going to be accused of in the courtroom. And then they are expected to defend themselves against accusations and details that they have no preparation for, all within less. And please keep in mind, if you're not Iranian and not familiar with the system, the Islamic jurisprudence system doesn't give you like a 5-day trial where there's a back and forth at all. So these individuals are getting massive accusations against them that carry the death penalty, and they're not even able to prepare. What we do know is that back in October, the Islamic regime's Ministry of Intelligence and the IRGC's intelligence agency accused them of being trained by the CIA to create unrest in Iran. And keep in mind, all they did was talk about Gina Amini's murder.
Unfortunately, the death sentences, executions, they continue. We know that there are several individuals whose death sentences have been confirmed. Who are those, and what are the updates on those?
Yeah, so this segment is going to be a bit long, so please bear with me. I'm going to give you a brief update. Mohammad Bobadlu is the name that we've been following. He's an individual. And again, this is why we get very frustrated, because news out of Iran is never 100% clear. There are some sources who say that Mohammad Bobadlu was arrested during peaceful protests. Then we've got other reports that say Mohammad Bobadlu is accused of having run over Islamic regime officials and killed other individuals. So we don't know what the truth is. All we know is that he hasn't had a fair trial, that he has been accused of muharebe, and he is facing the death sentence, and that has been upheld. So that's all we know. The good news is that there is a Canadian member of parliament who has decided to be his representative and is basically advocating for him. So that's something completely new, and that's, you know, very new, but all we know is that it's been months, and we're just unfortunately, unexpectedly waiting for the news. As we know, what usually happens is that these individuals are hanged right at morning prayers, which is another terrifying thing if you think about it. Individuals are in prisons, they hear morning prayers, and they know that somebody's about to be executed. So that's the reality of Mohamed Bobadlou. Now, the rest of it is there are 11 other individuals that we know of. I mean, there could be hundreds of other individuals who we don't know, but I'm going to go over their names, and hopefully you will be inclined to share some of these hashtags. So there's Mohamed Bobadlou, Ibrahim Naroui, Mansour Hout, Nizamuddin Hout, Kambiz Harut, he's 21 years old, Manucher Mehman Nawaz, Mansour Dah Marde, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing some of these names, Mujahid Kurkur Soheb Mirbaluch Rigi, he's 18 years old, Mahan Sajat Madani, Mohammad Borokani, Reza Norouzi. Actually, Reza Norouzi was released at latest news, so hopefully his whatever he's facing will be overturned. And then we have Saif Sharmadou, Jamshid Sharmadou, a foreign national who was arrested again and basically charged under false crimes that he never committed. So let's please keep those hashtags
let's quickly
going.
touch on one of the 3 men killed by the regime a couple of weeks ago.
Yes. So these individuals, we did unfortunately share their news. Majid Kazemi, Said Yaqoubi, and Saleh Mir Hashemi, they were executed after sham trials. The update is that Mohammad Kazemi's cousin, his name is Majid, he's been extremely courageous in coming forward and talking about what's been happening to their family since the murder of his cousin Majid. And you would think that an execution would be enough torture that the Islamic regime would put forth on a family, but apparently it doesn't end there. His cousin says that since Majid was executed, the police have been terrorizing their family. And quote, the Iranian special forces stormed his mother's house and beat up all the family members. They arrested Majid's brothers and sister and smashed everything. They took all of Majid's photos, and Majid's brothers are still in prison. So this just goes to show that when we're talking, when you hear us mentioning the names of individuals who are executed or under threats of being executed, it's not just them, it's their families who are really living their life under terrorism every single day.
Western countries are having prisoner exchanges with the Islamic regime, so much for not negotiating with terrorists. Can you update us on who's on the list?
So this one is, there are multiple countries in Manjun. Oman is the country that basically negotiated and orchestrated the most recent agreement between Belgium and the Islamic regime. So a Belgian aid worker was swapped for what the Islamic regime calls a diplomat. And I'm going to get into what this diplomat does. So we'll get into what diplomacy looks like for the Islamic regime. So first off, Olivier van der Castille, he was held hostage by the regime for 455 days. He was arrested on a visit to Iran in February 2022. He was charged with spying. He was sentenced to 40 years and 74 lashes. Now, Asadullah Assadi now gets to go back to Iran in exchange for this Olivier gentleman who's an aid worker. Now, Assadi, in case anybody is wondering, he was accused of plotting to bomb a rally in Paris in 2018. Now, side note, the rally was organized by the Mujahideen, who we know is a terrorist organization, but here we have one terrorist group trying to kill another terrorist group. So Assadi was technically a diplomat, but I don't know if Imanjun, if that's what you would call a diplomat, but basically his diplomatic immunity was waived and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison along with 3 other peoples. And now, by the way, it's not done. So this gentleman, Assadi, gets to go back to Iran, but the Islamic regime is not done. There are other terrorists who are Islamic Republic terrorists who are abroad, who are held in prisons, but the Islamic regime is looking to get them back. And the next one on the list they want to free is Hamid Nouri. He's being held in Sweden. And are you familiar with Hamid Nouri?
I'm still disgusted by the Assadi guy that they had like flays around his neck. And I was like, you guys are celebrating a terrorist, but that's what terrorists do. Hamid Nouri, I need a refresher. No.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's a former IRGC official. He was found guilty of war crimes in connection with the mass execution of Iranian political prisoners in 1988. So thousands of political prisoners were killed in Iran in 1988 under the Ibrahim Raisi regime, by the way. This gentleman was an IRGC at that point in time, Hamid Nouri. He's now 61 years old. He was arrested after flying to Sweden in 2019. He was tried under the principle of universal jurisdiction. And basically what he did, his role in the murders of all those political prisoners, make him a war criminal, Imanjun. That's why he's in jail in Sweden. And now the Islamic regime is looking to do a prisoner swap with Sweden to get him free.
Oh my goodness gracious. Just to keep on schedule, Paris, we're seeing more appeasement from Western countries, terrorist groups, this time in the form of a delegation from Belgium. What are the details about that? Belgium is really muddying the water here.
Doing a great job of being open to terrorists. So representatives from the Belgian government met with the head of Mujahideen, which is a cult and a known terrorist organization. So they met with Mariam Rajavi, who is the known head of a cult and terrorist organization. For anyone who's not aware, the Mujahideen Hal, MEK, was listed as a terrorist organization up until 2012 in the US. By the way, Hillary Clinton removed that designation herself back in 2012, but it does not erase all the crimes that the Mujahideen committed. Now, if you are not familiar with them, if you just, Google Mariam Rajavi or MEK, you will see what they look like. And it's an Islamic cult where all the women are dressed in red hijabs. They're very strict. They have very regimented lives. They all answer to her. It's extremely terrifying. So it's very interesting that the Belgian government and a delegation of women would go to meet with this person as perhaps the head of a new government once the mullah regime is overthrown. And apparently what they discussed is the oppressive mullah regime, leadership of women, which is, again, extremely ironic considering that the MEK themselves
Ukraine's parliament has approved sanctions against the Islamic regime. What are the details? I'm going to have to go through these a little bit quickly here.
Yeah, we'll go fast. So the Islamic regime, sorry, you went through the Taliban or you just jumped to Ukraine?
The Taliban. Oh my God, they're continuing to instigate violence at the border. What's the latest on that? Sorry about that.
Yeah, so the Islamic regime says the Taliban is not honoring a water treaty from 1973. So they're arguing at the border. They're accusing each other of shooting first. There's 2 Islamic regime border guards who were killed. There's a Taliban fighter who were killed. There's a video that shows that it was the Taliban who actually incurred. And unfortunately, the senior commander of the Taliban, he has gone on the record with a video saying that they will fight Iranians with more passion than they did against U.S. forces. And he goes on to say, quote, "We will conquer Iran soon if Taliban leaders give the green light."
And now about the Ukraine parliament that has approved sanctions against the Islamic regime. What's the news about that one?
Yeah, so it still needs to be signed into law by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, but that's a formality because he submitted the bill himself. What's happened is that the parliament has moved to impose sanctions on the Islamic regime for the next 50 years. They include trade, financial, technology sanctions, as well as limiting Tehran's use of Ukrainian airspace. And this comes right after there was a Russia attack Kiev with a drone strike, and the Ukrainians are saying that the drones were provided by the Islamic regime.
What about updates about protesters and detainees?
So Reza Nourzi was released, Khushi Dazari was released, but unfortunately Abolfaz Amir Atai, he was a 16-year-old, he participated in the protest. IRGC officials threw tear gas canister at his head. He's been paralyzed since then. That was 8 months ago, and he passed on Friday. And there are 3 more individuals. There are 3 Baluch children, essentially. Mohammad Darvish Naroui, he's 18. Benjamin Koukhkan, he's 17. And Yasin Kabdani, he's 19. And they are all basically awaiting execution sentences under the
16-year-old Abdul Fazza. That was heartbreaking. What are the action items this week, and what are the hashtags we're following?
I mean, several. Hopefully you followed, and hopefully there's a uniter that can paste them in the chat here, but mainly Mohammad Gobadlu let's say his name to save his life. IRGC terrorist. Save Sharma. Too much Salehi, of course. Make sure that you're following Let's Unite and Conquer on Instagram for the video for that. And Naz Mohammadi, Nilufar Hamadin, of course, Mahsa Amini.
Final message for our listeners.
Our language is called Persian when we're speaking in English and not Farsi. وقتی فارسی حرف میزنیم زبانمون هست فارسی و همونطوری که نمیگیم من English حرف میزنم. When we're speaking in English, we don't say I speak Englishy. We say I speak English. The same thing. I speak English.
I always love this
Persian.
contribution to all right, Paris, thank you so much. Sorry to make you rush to the last 5-10 minutes. Just wanted to make sure we stay on schedule. As always, we appreciate you. Shab Bakhair. Thank you, Azam.
Happy birthday.